We're going to move on to the next step in factoring and start to factor polynomials that have a leading coefficient other than 1. You'll notice here that when you multiply these together and we use FOIL, that the first term here is the product of the first term here times the first term here. So that means that this value is a multiple of these two. These two need to be factors. So we have to find out what those are. The constants also multiply together to give you the last. And then, if you remember correctly, the outers and the inners go together to give you the middle term. But this is always the product of the first two terms in the binomials, and this is always the product of the second terms in the binomials. So we're going to use that. We're going to go ahead and set up our two binomials, and we'll put an x in the front of each of these because that's going to come from this term right here. Now we have to come up with two factors that will multiply together to give you 6, and we're going to put them here and here. All right. Then we'll go back down and find two factors that multiply to give you 10 and put them here and here. And then we're going to check them to see if they worked to give us the middle term. We call this the guess and check method. Okay, now sometimes guess and check is really easy. Sometimes it becomes very complicated. So let's give it a try. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my two parentheses, and then going back, I'm going to realize that this tells me the signs are both going to be the same, and they will be whatever's here, so I know I have this to start with. I also see that I only have the one variable x, and that's going to come from these two terms. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to list the factors of 6. 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Factors of 4, 1 and 4, 2 and 2. And now I want you to guess and check. So I'm going to guess a 2 and a 3, and I'm going to guess a 2 and a 2, and then I'm going to check it. My outers give me 4x. My inners give me 6x. When I put those together, I get 10x. 10x is not what I'm looking for. So I guessed, I checked, it didn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the 2 and the 3 here, and I'm going to change this to maybe a 1 and a 4. So I'm going to put a 1 here and a 4 here. Okay, so that's going to change these. So I guessed again, and now I'm going to check. So I've got 2x times 4x is 8x. 1x times 3x is 3x. 8x plus 3x is 11x. Check, check. So there it is factored. And again, that's called the guess and check method. All right, let's try this again. So we're going to put our parentheses. We are going to say they're both going to be the same. They're both going to be plus. Choices, oops, x here, x here. Okay, now if this had been like y squared and an xy in the middle, then I would have simply put a y here on the end. All right, so now choices 1 and 6, 2 and 3, 1 and 3. Well, this is going to be easier because it's going to be 1 and 3. I just have to decide whether it's 2 and 6 or, 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. So I'm going to put a 2 and a 3. And now I'm going to check. My outers give me 6x. My inners give me 3x, which gives me 9x, which is not what I'm looking for. Before I discard these, I'm going to say, well, you know what? What if I flip these around? What if I exchange spots here? Okay, let's see what happens then, because this is going to give me a different answer. So now when I do this, this is 2x, 9x, which is 11x. Again, check, check. Okay? Like I said, this can be a lot of work, too much work. So if you do not like guess and check, if you would like something that is going to be more concrete, then you're going to like this method. I like to call it unfoil, and it definitely has a plan to it. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by multiplying the leading coefficient times the constant. So 3 times 8 is 24. Now we're going to list all the factors of 24. 1 and 24, and do this sequentially. 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. 5 is the only thing in between here. Since this is plus, okay, find the ones that add together to give you 14. And that is going to be these two right here. Now, remember, this was first terms multiplied together. This was the product of the last terms. And this was the sum of the product of the outers and the enters. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rewrite this polynomial. It is a trinomial now. We're going to turn it into a 4-term polynomial. So 3x squared is going to stay the same. The plus 8 is going to stay the same. But we're going to take the 14 and replace it with a 2 and a 12 and just give each one of them the variable. So this is going to be plus 2x plus 12x. Now I have a 4-term polynomial that I need to factor, and we do that by the process called grouping. So we're going to cut it in half. We're going to look at the first two and say, what do they have in common? They both have an x in common, and that's going to leave me with a 3x plus 2. Okay? Then we're going to look at these two and say, what do they have in common? They both have a positive 4 in common, which is going to leave me with a 3x plus 2. If you have done this method right, what's inside these parentheses will be the same. So I write that down, 3x plus 2, and then I put what's left over, an x here and a plus 4 here is in the second binomial. All right, if you were to use FOIL here and check that out, you would get that. All right, let's go through these kind of quickly. You need to stop, do them, and then look at my work. Multiply the front and the back together. Factor that. Find which of these will add together to give you 17 and rewrite the problem. 2x squared plus 3x plus 14x plus 21. Cut it in half. Factor each half. Pull out an x. That gives me a 2x plus 3. Pull out a positive 7, which gives me a 2x plus 3. Write down the binomial that they both have in common, 2x plus 3. What's left over? X plus 7, and that's how easy that is. Try this one. So 3 times 16 is 48. Here's the factors of 48. This is plus, so I'm looking for the ones that will add together to give me 16. That's going to be these two right here. Now, this is a minus sign in the middle, so that means that both of these are going to be minuses, because they're going to add together to give me a negative 16. So rewrite it with 4 terms. That's minus 4x minus 12x plus 16. Let's cut it in half. Common factor here is x. That gives me a 3x minus 4. All right, now remember, I want what's inside this parenthesis to be exactly the same as this one. So I want this to be a 3x minus 4. That might help me decide that I'm going to pull out a negative 4 in order to make that happen. That's going to give me a 3x minus 4 and an x minus 4, and use FOIL and check it. A little switch up here. I've got 3 times negative 4, which gives me negative 12. And then when I do that, instead of looking for the ones that add together to give me 11, I'm looking for the ones that subtract to give me 11. So it's going to be these guys right here. And again, that sign in the middle goes with the larger, so this will be a positive, this will be a negative. Rewrite it. 3n squared minus 1n plus 12n minus 4. Cut it in half. These two have an n in common, which gives me a 3n minus 1. These two have a 4 in common, which gives me a 3n minus 1. If you've done this correctly, what's inside the parentheses is exactly the same, and then what's left over makes up your second binomial. Almost easy. 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. List the factors. This is minus. So which of these is going to subtract to give you 2? It's going to be these guys right here. This is negative, so the negative goes with the larger of the two. All right, so rewrite this. 3x squared plus 4x minus 6x minus 8. Cut that in half. These two have an x in common, which gives me a 3x plus 4. Again, I want this to be a 3x plus 4. So that's letting me know that I need to pull out a negative 2 in order to make that happen. All right, write down the 3x plus 4, and then what's left over, and there it is, factored. Sometimes when it starts with a negative, you want to go ahead and pull out a negative from the very beginning. Sometimes you'll just pull out a -1. This is important to do because we learned some rules about how to tell what the signs are. Those rules don't apply if the leading coefficient is negative. So if you decide to factor out a -1 at the very beginning, it needs to follow through throughout the whole problem. So let's try one or two of those. The only difference here is I'm going to factor out a -1 and change this to be 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor this using the method we just talked about, but then the -1 will be out front. So I'm going to write this as, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, I'm going to write this as 2x squared. The ones that subtract are going to be these two, positive, positive, negative. So minus x plus 6x minus 3. Again, the -1 simply stays out front. Cut this in half. These have an x in common, which is going to give me a 2x minus 1. These have a 3 in common, which is going to give me a 2x minus 1. So this is going to be -1, 2x minus 1, x plus 3, and that is it.